Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Free Radical Media Podcast. I am Eric Scott Picard, joined as ever by my co-host Patrick. Tonight, we are going to talk about technology. Tonight's show, we've got our return guest, Adam Jaay. You may remember a previous installment where we discussed 3D printing with him. Adam is a maker, and he's our resident Free Radical Media expert on all things 3D printing and future technology. So, Adam, how are you doing?
Good. How are you guys doing tonight? Appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been looking forward to it. We've been trying to get this episode going for a few weeks, actually. It's good to finally get you on.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on right now. A lot of interesting things.
Yeah. Awesome. That's what it sounds like. First of all, I want to touch on something. We talked about it really briefly in the previous episode. We've all heard a lot more about it since, and it's something that kind of really excited all of us. The recycling program. Now that the basic idea is taking scrap plastics, pollutants, particularly in the ocean. I mean, we see all these giant islands of plastics, floating through the oceans. Now, there are groups that are trying to perfect the process of using those plastics in a 3D printer, correct?
Yes, one of the sub-projects of the Plastic Bank initiative involves picking up plastic, in this case, off the coastline, because we just don't have the money to send people out in boats with dredge nets and bring in the plastic from the gyres. So they started off scouring the coastline, but it's very easy to find scrap plastic on the coastline. It just drifts in from the open sea, and they collected it, cleaned it. They had a rather large industrial size operation that was grinding it up and producing small pellets, which was then going into another machine to produce filament that would go into a 3D printer. And the idea was to get it down to a filament that could be used in the ever-growing personal 3D printing ecosystem. And they've had success to the point where videos and claiming that this is what they want to do and it's proven, and trying to set the trend. So at least somebody is out there doing it, and hopefully we see copycats or somebody else joining the effort.
But how long do you think this technology before it hits the masses, before it's usable?
It's very close, and there's a bit of a rumble in the maker community, because as you get to the point of mass appeal, you really end up, through the current marketing system, you get dumbed down tools. And sometimes the tools get so dumbed down that now it's not even a product that the makers want to even deal with. And it seems like a Mickey Mouse version of, or Play School even version of the creative tool. And usually when you get it dumbed down, you're limiting a lot of freedoms, so a person doesn't vary and get themselves into a situation where they're going to return an actual piece of merchandise. So growing pains. If right now there's a lot of the Las Vegas CES just happened prior to this recording, and we see a lot of consumer level 3D printers coming in all shapes and sizes, down to about $300 price point, which is a big change from 1,000 to 2,000 being last year. So as it gets more or easily acquired by a little bit of saving, then you get it more proliferation throughout the culture. And once people get one, it's when you get the bug, and they're going to get another one. Maybe they're going to stick with the same brand, but they're going to go up in size. And what we see as a trend right now is extremes, both in small printers and very large printers. People are going from just the desktop size to specialized printers. People interested in, design and jewelry and things like that. Very small printers are becoming available. Very, tools that get out of the user's work and just do what they're supposed to do. And then the big ones, everything from a guy printing his own lawnmower to, the houses and everything in between.
Yeah, that's it's nice to see it becoming so affordable just for your basic units. I mean, the units you get on the market though are not ones that you can that you can just use scrap plastic in, right? I mean, that's not something that's really
no.
out there. Or...
No, a bit of a contradiction in trying to bring the scrap plastic to the consumers, because you've got so many variables, you got too much money being risked. One example is I think it was either Coke and Will.i.am and 3D Systems, or Stratasys and Pepsi and some other person I can't remember, but they were promoting a printer that operated on a cartridge that prevented you from using just any old filament. And their promotion was, we promise you that in a spool of this filament, we promise you there's a certain percentage of recycled Coke bottles or something like that. And it's, you're going on the promise of a large corporation, and it's just kind of a marketing gimmick.
It's kind of like kind of like how they put green-friendly soap in a plastic bottle,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's to make you feel a little bit better. When, they're skipping over all the possibilities where that actually could be, 90 or 80% recycled material, if they would just open it all up to people being to use what they want. But the companies that have the money to bring this to the masses, they're running on the old paradigm of, let me sell you the ink too. And instead of trying to be there first and do it better, they're going to lock you into a brand ecosystem, and even go so far as to try to sell you the files or make you buy the files that what pops out of the thing. And I personally see that just falling to pieces, because nobody wants that. And that's just running on the momentum of a very old model. But that's why you can't just bring recycled plastic straight to the masses. It's the makers that have to be the bridge between that and the public.
Yeah, and the community itself, right? Yeah. Which is what I really like about 3D printing, and it's kind of it's at such an early stage. It's hard to see if it's going to be co-opted by corporate interests, or if it's going to remain in the hands of the actual maker community.
Well, I mean, it'll probably be both. Just like computers, we're in the time when we're just beyond the computer clubs, getting a bunch of LEDs to do math based on toggle switches. We're a few years after that. But as you can see, big companies pop up to bring it to the people who didn't want to get too involved. But then you had the whole fringe who held to the core, and those guys became the industry leaders and the people that get the jobs, really, when the moneyed people need something done.
Yeah, sure. I hear that this year there's a lot of patents expiring, right? So, I mean, do you think that's going to kind of help put the more cutting edge or interesting aspects of this technology into more hands?
It will, but not immediately, because once the patents expire, unless people are ready, and there are probably a couple of companies ready and poised to bring something to market immediately. But basically, you're going to see a slight jump in technology on the metal desktop kind of printing, selective laser sintering. It'll be probably even more expensive just because of the stock material, and it'll be more for specialized high-end things. Um, but what that does bring up is the whole, idea of the patent system being the way it is. If it hadn't, we would have been doing this, more than a decade ago. The technology really was there. It was just all locked up. And right now, the big news or the scuttlebutt around NASA is that they emailed a wrench to space, and they were all, woo, yippee, we didn't have it up there, and now we do because we emailed it up there. But it always kind of bugged me. Why did we, as like a hobbyist, they're using a hobbyist level FDM machine, really, that's been augmented by some hacker kids that, saw a hole and, filled it with their machine. Why is the hobbyist element bringing anything to NASA? Because of patents, NASA didn't have this when, they could have easily been printing wrenches, 10, 20 years and brought it to us, like, Velcro and Tang and all that other great stuff. So it's kind of a interesting example of the failure of all of that and how it's pretty much backwards now.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, that's certainly a failure of the corporate system. It is, and that is ridiculous. you know, level technology. I mean, NASA's supposed to have cutting edge everything. You're right. They brought us all those fantastic products.
Yeah. So you could go conspiracy theory or just plain, dumbfounded. Either one is, it really doesn't matter. It's ineptitude.
Yeah. I agree with that. Regardless of what you think about it, it's ludicrous. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about these the metal wood fabrics. How has that progressed, and tell the listeners like how that how does it differ from the standard filament 3D printing? I mean, is it a different process?
All right, so it's predominantly, we're seeing a lot of exotic materials come out between now and the last time we spoke, and most of them have been a PLA-based plastic, which is the corn plastic, doped with some kind of dust or other raw material. So I've used wood in the copper fill used, and we've seen a couple other things just mixed in. A company called Color Fab sells a lot of the batches, and they're really working out a lot of interesting results. Bamboo is another one, so I'm really interested in the ones that are using a replenishable or easily replenishable source. We still haven't seen any direct hemp use, but all of the pieces are there. There are companies that sell hemp plastic that are basically pellets of a PLA and hemp hybrid, and it would just have to be a person, I'm assuming, purchasing a bulk of those pellets and putting it through their Filabot or extruder bot or some other machine that's out there that can produce 3D printing filament with raw pellet material, and you're off to the races printing something with hemp. So it's probably just the how many pounds of raw material can be imported at one time. There's these draconian laws on that. So once those are lifted, then you can see some real interesting things. But I guess bamboo would be the most exciting things to date as far as like a permaculture friendly filament.
Yeah, that is interesting. I remember our last conversation. When you brought up using hemp, we all had this big light bulb moment. What an incredible thing. And honestly, bamboo, I mean, that's an interesting thing as well. I mean, it's a quick growing, abundant resource.
Yeah, but the predominant plastic used with these little mixtures is the PLA, so it's the corn byproduct material, which we have plenty of that.
At what point do you think this is going to reach like mass appeal? Like, what do you think the catalyst will be to bring 3D printing to the masses?
I think we're seeing it with the Enable project. People coming together, grassroots, to give little kids and veterans and everybody who might need it a prosthetic hand of all variations, sizes, configurations. It's really interesting to see what they're doing. That's just showing people the complexity and strength of the objects that can be produced, and that's really useful when you think about, the most useful printing application. It has to be giving a little kid a hand. So I think that's going to be the quote unquote killer app, and we a crossover now. There's tons of stories coming out with people using 3D printing to help injured animals. So this whole prosthetics meme, I think, is really going to be the vanguard topic to get people aware of what their neighbor is doing down the street. And it's going to be something positive. It's going to be something interesting. It's going to be something. So that's what's going to really inform people, I think.
Yeah, that's such a great product or project. You're right. I mean, that's what could be better, than giving somebody a prosthesis who needs one. Yeah, and you're right. Just from a just from a public relations standpoint, I mean, that's something that would it warms hearts. It informs people that this technology is out there and what it's capable of. I mean, I remember I was reading an article from earlier last year. On Motherboard. It's a Vice Media imprint. It was actually about the plastic bank, I believe. And at the beginning, the author talked about, how they hadn't really been impressed with 3D printing because a lot of things you see are just, well, your little wrenches and stuff like that, your little plastic products, your little toys, so on and so forth, But something like a prosthesis, I mean, that really gets people's attention.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys, anybody seen the Netflix documentary Legend?
Say again, you kind of broke up.
Sorry. Netflix has a documentary. They bought it. Print the Legend. It's all about 3D printing, MakerBot, Formlabs. It came out a few months ago. I'm assuming none of you guys have seen it.
No, I have
No,
not
I did
actually.
not.
Huh.
If you have Netflix, it's a real good watch, and it gives you an inside view of the two major companies in the early movement and how they rose and fell, and basically same old story.
The CEO always got a bad rap for a lot of good reasons. But one of the great moments in that film is they're at a convention and they're videoing him and he's all mic'd up, and some guy asked him if these things, meaning the 3D printers, can print anything but trinkets still. Like he was just, making a snide remark. And Brie Pettis, to his credit, said to the guy, if you think putting a hand on a little girl with no hand is, a trivial trinket in the face. That was pretty much the best part of that movie. And it was very uncharacteristic of him. And he put it all on the line. But that basically is the end-all be-all argument to this great American tchotchke machine. Yes, people were printing Stanford bunnies by the lots because Stanford offered a free downloadable STL file of a bunny for 3D artists before 3D printing ever, happened. So a lot of the first prints coming off these things were just little plastic bunnies, and people are like, well, that's stupid. Why do I need a machine that makes little plastic bunnies? So it was very short-sighted. But now those people can be shut down with, printing hands for people who don't have hands and can't afford them.
Yeah. I've always heard that when they discovered the electron, there was no use for it.
Yeah.
And now electricity, it changed the entire world. The internet in the beginning was just something for academics in the defense industry, and now it's revolutionized, pretty much every part of daily life, at least in the West, and and so we're at the kind of the beginning stages of this technology still, but I really think
it has the potential to radically change our way of life.
Well, on the other medical side, there's a gentleman who has his own podcast about 3D printing, and his wife had a medical condition, a brain tumor, and he took the MRI scans and 3D modeled the tumor, 3D printed it, and mailed it to a bunch of top doctors all over the country to try to get second opinions or somebody to take or find the best fit for who could help his wife. And I believe that saga is still ongoing. But he did the thing and took, the medical situation into his own hands and used these tools that he was privy to, try to do something. And the last I heard, it was working out in their favor. But he hasn't put out a podcast in a while, so the updates are sparse. But that's the type of things that are happening with these powerful tools getting into the public. It's, it can affect pretty much anything depending on how you apply it.
Yeah. Yeah, what the Enable project I'd like everybody to look up, or Enable. It's E-Nable? Is that what it is?
I think that would be a good search term, and that would get you to where it is.
Yeah, I mean that's a fantastic application of the technology. I was reading, a little something else about how this could potentially, revolutionize things. And somebody mentioned that you could combine industrial 3D printers, especially, the new ones that do metals and other materials, with robotics technology, and you have a completely automated assembly process for even very complex machines. They were talking about applying it to like fighter jets, which is a frightening thing. But I mean, if you apply it to, automobiles or, something that's more useful than a fighter jet, I mean, doesn't that disrupt, I mean, that changes that economics game,
Well, the whole localized manufacturing on any scale disrupts what we've got, right now. So that's just unavoidable. But you really, in that story, you've got two things there. You've got people and companies who are endeavoring to create machines that are super complex, have multiple capabilities within them, and can assemble electronics or components. And you've got a very Tony Stark, Iron Man's lab kind of situation going on there. Then on the other side of that story, you've got vehicles, or let's just go with the car, with a 3D printer in the dashboard with what it needs and the specs already installed to print out, this, that, and the other thing. It's like having a jack or a spare tire now. These things are good in all doses at first, I'm sure, but it'll be gimmicky, and then it'll be expected, and then it'll just be a thing.
Yeah, as the progression goes on, right.
And even this past holiday season, we had, I think it's the first commercially available VR headset with Samsung and Oculus teaming up. And it's interesting to see. It's like VR's here and 3D printers are here, and it's like I've been hearing for quite a while now that they're going to interrelate on a pretty deep level, and I'm pretty fascinated to see what that's going to look like.
Well, it's going to be, hopefully, content creation tools will be, the really go-to application. Like, hopefully there'll be tons of different ones, people vying, for your download. But when you use VR to bring cool stuff, into manifestation in the third dimension, that's going to be the killer app for both 3D printing and virtual. Have experience is one thing, but bringing something out with you, that's super cool. That's, we haven't done that yet.
Yeah, it's almost surreal. Yeah, it's almost surreal. You can't really wrap your head around like the implications of something like that. Especially with this VR technology, something we've been really excited about as well. We're trying to get a show together just to talk about VR, but it's I always go back to like Star Trek. I mean, this is like the holodeck and the replicator on Star Trek. It's
it's really interesting.
Well, was there an episode where there has to be, and I'm sure there's a Trekkie nerd out there that knows, is there an example of somebody having a fun experience in the holodeck and wanting to keep a souvenir in their quarters, so they spit it out of the replicator, when they get back to their quarters? There has to be some physical example of that. And if so, that needs to be documented so we can, it would show that it was prophetic and one of those things that'll go on some BuzzFeed list of, 10 things from Star Trek that actually happened.
Right. Yeah. I challenge all the Star Trek fans who are more deeply into it than I am to find that example and let us know.
I'll have to warm up the Netflix and start going through Next Generation and find it. I'm sure there's got to be. Maybe it's in Picard's quarters. I'm already obsessed with
it. You're right. I'll probably be on a Star Trek forum on Reddit somewhere asking. It's so many times in the past, science fiction has predicted pretty accurately. The kind of technology that we have now. Yeah, that's another example, I think.
There's a I believe an open source tricorder project that kind of looks like the old first generation tricorder, but it's a 3D printed housing. That's how I know about it. But it's got a bunch of open boards that you can obtain and solder together. And the guy's trying to jam as many sensors as he possibly can into this thing. But it's, used as a 3D printed housing as its, whole structure for the open source thing. So you got a bunch of cool tie-ins. Trekkies love 3D printers. I would like to see a survey of 3D print. I might do this on the 3D printing Reddit subreddit and see how many people are Trekkies that are actually owners of 3D printers. There's probably a good number of the early adopters that are hardcore Trekkie enthusiasts.
Yeah, I bet that number is pretty high. I bet that number is pretty high. It's science fiction has become reality. And as we get into this, it is so revolutionary in so many ways. I keep saying that, but it's like we were talking about last time. You said that any kind of sphere of modern life that anybody could name, 3D printing can touch on it in some way. Right?
Yes.
And I believe that statement more and more as I go along looking at some of this stuff, especially, it seems like we can 3D print all kinds of materials now. It's so versatile.
Anytime that you're affecting matter, any hobby or endeavor or discipline, whatever, if you're trying to affect matter or understand it, and then 3D printing or 3D scanning, 3D rendering, all of these different tool sets, this new time, are useful and will further your understanding or endeavors. Guaranteed. Money back.
Yeah. Now, I understand that there's, we were talking about affecting matter. I saw just briefly something. There's a team out of MIT, I think, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I saw it referred to as 4D printing. You said that's, not quite the best term to use, but why don't you, it's not something I know much about, so why don't you explain what they mean by that?
Well, there's a couple projects. Programmable matter is probably a better term. Some of these projects are a material extruded or cut and mushed in a certain way where when it's exposed to water or air or, you break the seal kind of thing, it'll expand into its full form. That's one way. There's another type of project that would take a material that, and this for most purposes with some nano mechanics, but you have a material be extruded, like as Terence McKenna would say, some strange form of spaghetti. And then you'd have an exterior force or information source to program each segment in telling it which way to fold or bend or manipulate. So it's without seeing, a lot of these are theoretical. We haven't seen anything practical just yet. But if you kind of extrapolate in your mind down the road what that means, it's basically one stock material to rule them all, and invisible electromagnetic forces that mimic the natural, DNA programming and the stamping out of enzymes, that kind of thing. Very, very sci-fi, very minimalist, futuristic sci-fi, almost wizardry. Just having your raw material and, magically telling it what to do, and boom, it folds from one end to the other into a lipstick case or, television housing or Raspberry Pi case, if for the techies out there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's pretty incredible. I mean, could you even it's something like that? Could you make it like a shelter of some kind, like like one of these tiny houses? Like you'd have this, a piece of programmable matter that's folded up into a carryable object, and then you put it down, and it becomes like a little shelter.
Well, yes. I mean, all of these things are scalable by nature. You just start with the larger stock material. However, with this type of technology, you run into certain things. It's very specialized stock material. When exerting the forces externally on a material rather than having them programmed internally can be beneficial for larger operations, or like they're talking NASA again, they're talking about the moon and Mars, and sending something there that can whip up a Mars dust or moon dust slurry, and 3D print that slurry into a shelter or housing or something like that. So using, and a lot of people in this movement have been approached by different people who want to go to third world countries and, bring some machine that can just take, whatever they have excess of, dung and mud, and, within a week, you've got a little village of 3D printed houses. So using what's already there has its benefits. And then this high tech stuff is a very, I guess it's a very aristocratic type of programmable material, very elitist. It would be very expensive.
One only has to wonder, though, what happens when that programmable material is on the nano scale?
Well, then you get the gray goo, fiasco.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of there. Yeah. I guess those are the frightening aspects. As with any technology, you're gonna have people who find the worst case scenario. But it's valuable to have those people do that. I'm not saying it's not, but I would rather look at the positives.
Because McKenna brought this exact thing up before, and I've kind of applied the grit. He thought about nanotechnology and using our landfills as a perfect place to feed these nanobots that are producing whatever the heck you're asking them to make. Because the raw material is already there, it's already refined, it's already chunks of metals and polymers and everything else you'd want. And if to avoid such a gray goo, fiasco, you'd really want its power source to be, or an electric fence, or a central post that it couldn't, go more than such and such, radius or away from it. Most likely tethering it by some kind of power source. But imagine a couple of weird Tesla tower things at your local landfill, and it was just the wireless power source for the nanites who are eating up all the landfill, and over in the corner you've got raw material filament just being stacked by invisible elves. Elves, really? We're talking about tiny elves.
Yeah. Yeah, McKenna and Pinchbeck's little elves.
Exactly.
It's funny. I was watching a Christmas movie over the holidays, and they go into Santa's like headquarters, and there's all these little elves flying around on all these weird three-dimensional objects, and I'm like, man, that's what the future's gonna be like at some point. Everyone's gonna have a freaking factory of 3D printers.
Well, I've always, my curse has always been just coming up with too many ideas to follow through on even half of them. So I've always, required an army of elves to do my bidding. So I'm closer and closer to achieving that. Just need smaller printers that can make other printers, but then the Grey Goo thing happens. It goes perpetual. It always goes perpetual. But with science fiction, you need a bit of danger, I guess.
And gray goo being when these things kind of tear apart the fabric of reality.
Well, it's when there's so many that there's nothing but them. So as you got this gray, especially on the nano scale, if you had a billion, billions and billions of little nanites eating everything and reproducing using the raw materials, then eventually it would just be nothing. And it would just be, unless they were a different color, then it would be that color. It's a very generalized thing.
Yeah, so it's some manner of goo. Yeah, with all this technology, it kind of, it reminds me of a lot of things. The first thing that comes, the Zeitgeist people. I'm not gonna remember the main guy behind the organization, right? But I'm sure a lot of people listening are familiar with the Zeitgeist
Peter
series.
Joseph.
Peter Joseph. Yeah, thank you. The general thesis is, they have these self-contained communities where, resources are just constantly rolling off the line, essentially all automated, like the need for like manual labor, right? And his thesis, I've never really, I find it interesting. I've never fully agreed with it. But with this kind of technology, it becomes more and more feasible to set things up in that way. It's like John Keynes years and years ago predicted that by this time, people would only be working 15, 18, 22 hours a week. Of course, the capitalist corporate system was able to prevent that from happening. But even then, the automation was at a point where people wouldn't have to work as much. But this, it seems to almost eliminate the human component in manual labor and resource production.
Well, yes and no. The fear I run into is people, oh Jesus, these robots are going to take my job. Well, for those people, you just learn how to fix robots, and there's going to be plenty of jobs. These things still need to be maintained, and content needs to be generated for these things to be, spit out. So there's other avenues for human interaction, whether or not the system we've got right now will allow such a thing. I think that's a whole other ball of wax and isn't, dictated by the technological capabilities. But it could very well be giving us a peek of what is possible, and then we strive for that as far as a cultural shift. That's still a big possibility.
Yeah,
it's the maker movement is, I guess, infesting large corporations because of the need for bottom line thinking. You have the industrial side of 3D printing, which has been around for 20 years, and all the big players as far as corporations and product designers, they knew about this stuff. It was just out of their budget. You've got a guy running an R&D lab, and you got 4 people in between him and a large machine that would cost $120,000. And every time one person in between him and that machine balks at the price, then the deal's off. Now you've got people in large corporations, very respectable, acquiring these hobbyist machines and infusing their development floors with a maker space mentality, because it's so cheap, because the tools are just so readily available. Or electronic engineers can go down to Radio Shack and get a prototype board and, you know, get them rolling on a product idea in an afternoon. And that's way different than, you know, slide rules and, you know, the engineers smoking cigarettes over drafting tables. We've come, you know, far, far from that. And you've got a very interesting adoption of a very anti-corporate mentality taken in by the corporations because of bottom line. I think they're going to find out it's going to change their own corporate culture in a way that they didn't expect.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean, and I see that. You know, time and time again, you do have, you know, technologies that seem to be, they have revolutionary potential, and they do get kind of sucked in. The capitalist model is very adaptable. I can definitely say that about it. It's adapted to technology, you know, for the last, well, since the, you know, the first industrial revolution, and it's been able to survive. Whether or not it'll survive this is a, you know, I guess it's a matter of conjecture.
Well, one model that is going to give it a run for its money is the whole time bank system. And the reason I say that is A, because it exists and it's thriving in its own sense. People are adopting it here and there. And B, with this 3D printing meme coming up, the paradigm shift is away from material cost, because the, you know, stock material is really cheap. Time purchase and pays for itself over a certain amount of time depending on how you use it. So what you end up having as a premium is time on the machine. And if you have an infusion of this technology into the public headspace, then this weird psychological shift of time being valuable, more valuable than the, you know, the material end of the endeavor. And just that kind of link between you know, value away from materialism and towards time and energy, I think that's a positive thing. But we shall see.
Right. I mean, I like that, and I like that kind of thing is pretty prevalent in the maker community. I mean, would you say that there is, like, you know, a definite, you know, push toward like alternative economic models in the community? You know, I mean, is it truly like a becoming less of like a hobby, radical like shift in the people who are involved in it?
The people who are involved with it, almost without fail, want to end the rat race and make things for themselves and their community. They want to be the manufacturing hub. There's a part of them that wants to do it as a living. And a lot of people are just, you know, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And sometimes nothing at all sticks. It's a little early, but what we're seeing is people are showing their hand as far as, you know, their inner desire of how they want their life to be structured. They want to be able to make what they need and help the people around them by making what they need.
That's encouraging. I mean, that's real encouraging to me, at least. It seems part of a greater shift that we see all the time that we talk about. You know, I mean, there seems to be a shift in, you know, we talk about a variety of subjects, but the thing that all is that people just want something different than what exists now in people's daily lives, you know. And this is just another one of those, you know, this has such a radical potential, and it's such a radical shift from the normal way of thinking. It's all these pieces are going to fit together, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely it's going to be the future will be made manifest by our own intentions. That's just and that seems like an airy fairy thing to say, but with this whole, you know, these machines that are rolling off the assembly lines of other machines are going to enable us to really construct, you know, our reality the way we want on a nuts and bolts level. And, you know, this with the CES show and all the different printers that are coming out, we're seeing, you know, the trends of printers that are incorporating all the bells and whistles and all the exotic tech into one machine that is just made to make electronic components. And we're going to see, that evolve to a place that, that one machine will be like having 100 different circuit boards. You just have to wait. And that's where the time comes in again. It's all the premium on time, and the raw materials, the physical elements of it is almost a pittance compared to, the value of the time that goes into it. So I think we're going to see very interesting ramifications from that. And it's just going to be pervasive in pretty much everything you do.
It seems like something that could really move toward like a post-scarcity situation, which is, something I really want to see. I want to see us get to the post-scarcity, period of time, which I think will definitely happen in human history if we don't, blow up the planet, before then. But this fits into a post-scarcity scenario perfectly.
So in a situation like that, it's like, where's the limit on an individual's reach with his culture he's creating? Because it would be almost to the point that every person had a entire culture onto themselves.
Well, it's possible. If you take it to the extreme, you've got somebody who wants to strike it out on their own. Even let's take those people who live up in the Arctic Circle, that kind of extreme living. 10 years down the line, when this technology is all fleshed out and you're living in a world where all you really need is said universal stock material of whatever, awesome magic plastic or polymer material you got going. Let's just, for conversation's sake, let's say it's hemp. You got spools and spools of these things, delivered to you, and it's the same reason why NASA is interested in this technology, because you can take this material with you, and the material becomes whenever you, with some element of recyclability involved, and you just have a library of useful things that you might need, plus the tools to create something on the fly. The same that make that can be applied here on Earth to places where the only reason people don't live there is because it's very difficult to get material out. But if you had a self-sustaining, mentality, living off the land, low footprint, using technology, every, trick of technology you can possibly muster in order to live the most, low impact footprint on where you're at, that could be a whole subculture that blossoms from just this weird thing that's happening right now.
That's incredible. That dovetails right into your permaculture communities. You know what I mean? Your off the grid and your sustainable living communities. If you put those two philosophies together, you've got a pretty self-sufficient model for a community.
Yeah, they talk about putting, we got all of this unexplored or populated area under the ocean, that whole Sequest franchise that really was an interesting concept. Population increase, just send it under the ocean. But this whole 3D printing thing, the same thing, just taking an inhospitable place where it's hard to get materials down to, and it makes it that much easier to exist there because you just turn this magic material into anything you need it. There's a lot of people who want to inhabit the ocean, either above, under, both, anything.
Yeah, that's really the only frontier we have to go to on the planet. You were talking earlier. It's the speculative aspect of being able to send up this technology to Mars or the moon and have it construct something, and then you go, and then there's already pre-existing resources there for you to use. It makes colonization of Mars, for example, a lot easier.
Well, let's go back to the patents. If it wasn't for patents, then what we just laid out here basically says that because of patent law as it is right now, we are at least a decade behind colonizing Mars. If that's not a reason to repeal the whole, I don't know what is. It's negatively affected the species.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's we are at the cusp of something here, and that whole system, the patent laws, the corporatist system. I mean, it's gonna strangle us. We have such potential that it exists, and those systems are standing in the way. You know. Um, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. We mentioned last time. I'll mention it again. This kind of thing was in Terrence McKenna's head many years ago. You know what I mean? Guys like him. And it existed in science fiction. And now it's manifesting itself in reality. A lot of this a crazy person when he was alive, but if you take a look at his body of work, I mean, it's manifesting itself.
Even before him, guys like Alfred North Whitehead, this idea that the platonic dimension is something that almost acts as some sort of attractor, as opposed to it being it casts its shadow through time. And what we're seeing here with this mass, virtual and 3D printed augmented reality is that it literally is going to be a direct reflection of basically our own imaginations of the archetypal realm, platonic dimension, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be a direct mirror image of that, and it's fascinating to see what kind of shape that'll take.
I think one of the large cultural impacts is going to be a renaissance in filmmaking. I think with the current generation who are growing up right now with 3D printing and a studio in your phone, I think those two things, when it comes to prop making and dressing up a set, I think you're going to see a lot of storytelling happen, and I think it's going to be a cultural catalyst, I think.
Wow, you're right, and that's something that's something I hadn't even thought of. Just think about the cultural and artistic impact that this kind of thing has. I mean, what happens when a 13-year-old can just 3D print a guitar in his bedroom? You know what I mean, and learn how to play, or like you said, like independent filmmaking. Because we do have all that technologies at our fingertips, and it becomes very affordable, and it kind of takes it away from the whole Hollywood system. Grassroots artistic expression, that's another thing to be affected by this.
Well, I go back to Star Trek. There was a great Will Wheaton episode, Wesley Crusher episode, where him and a bunch of kids were abducted by some aliens who wanted kids. And one of the ways they were trying to entice the kids into staying was showing them all these cool creative tools that they had. And one of them was a laser tool, and they had a block of hardwood, and the visual effect was whatever was in the kid's head. He dragged the laser down over the block of wood, and like a dolphin sculpture was revealed. So with the VR and with a couple projects going on right now, mapping human thought, there's a couple, I think one project that was successfully created a cube by thinking about a cube. And all this, helmet monitoring brain activity, and it was plumbed into a CAD program with some software, black magic, and just imagine where that's going. A kid has a thought, and just by concentrating a little bit can sculpt some virtual clay into an approximation of what he's thinking about, and then that gets 3D printed, for whatever, a school project, a component to a machine he's building, something cool to hang on the wall, whatever.
Yeah, that's incredible. I remember the episode, actually. But that is insane. We touched on that last time too. You put on this VR headset, you imagine anything you want. It, like you said, it goes into your software, and your 3D printer spits it out. I mean, that's incredible.
it is black magic. In the occult, they say that if you perceive something in the astral plane with your mind, it must manifest in reality, as above, so below, right? It goes into that Platonic ideal that, Pat was talking about. And this is technology that actually makes that feasible. That's an incredible.
If I could have my at a cliche of lunch with a couple famous people from history, dead or alive, if I could have a 3D printing discussion of the state of affairs right now with any three people from history, it would be Tesla, Crowley, and McKenna. And I think it would be a very eclectic conversation about where things are headed and why things are looking the way they are right now. And if I had a bonus of Marshall McLuhan throw in there as well.
That would be a fantastic conversation.
Yeah. But I mean, all those components of what, those guys' bailiwicks are very prevalent to what's going on right now and the importance of what's going on right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. There's a lot of synergy between these ideas, and it seems like we're reaching. I don't like to use the word singularity because it has connotations now. But
well, it has a connotation of a single moment. When I think a lot of people who are who understand the whole nuances of McKenna's spiel, the Renaissance, people weren't one day woke up and be like, wow, it's the Renaissance, like Christmas morning. When historians look back and said, oh, from here to here, there were some big changes in what was going on. I think we're going to see that same, hindsight on what's going on right now. There's a moment compared to the epochs of history, there was a moment that we got to live through where a lot of things changed, to the point where if you had a person at the end of their life in this moment go back and tell their younger self about what it was like when they were older, it would be alien. And that's that only happens a few times in history.
Yeah. I mean, that's something everyone we talk to, and I think a lot of people who are into this kind of thing, who are listening, who are involved, everybody says we're at a special time in history. Some people do intuitively know it, and you're absolutely right. When Dante was writing the Divine Comedy, he didn't realize that was when historians were going to say, well, this is right about when the Renaissance started, but during the Renaissance, there were people who said, this is a special time, it really is. It's just in hindsight is when we can, have a full view of what exactly was happening.
Yeah, I think the McKenna, his whole idea was kind of polluted by the Moore's law mentality, where you get exponential into exponential into exponential, where eventually you imagine just a blur of white light where it's all too much. But if you live through it you acclimate moment to moment, and it becomes less of a blur and more coherent reality.
Sure. Never thought about it like that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
almost like a white hole in the fabric of time,
Yeah. But if you go frame to frame, if you take 1,000 frames, overlay them, you get the blinding white light. But if you live frame to frame, it's all partitioned information. And the lower dimensional way of saying it is if you boil a frog slowly and he doesn't notice. that old chestnut.
Right, yeah. That's true. I'd rather go with the first metaphor.
Yeah.
I hate to think that we're just going to be boiled alive by all this. Although I suppose the potential is there. But I mean, I guess it's our job to make sure that that's not the way it goes, right? I mean, I think people who are like awake to these kind of things, I think it's kind of a responsibility to try to guide this in a good direction.
Well, if you're conscious of it, at least try to, steer the boat as best you can.
Right.
Or at least shout out, land that way.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Try to shout over the gale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it's man, it's just such a big topic, such an interesting thing. I mean, revolutionary piece of technology, all these technologies coming together. Is there anything else that really like sticks out in your mind as something that's, like truly interesting or truly cutting edge?
See, there's so much that we don't get to know.
Yeah.
I'm fairly convinced there's way cooler things happening on the other side of the paywalls, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, what we get to we're in the sandbox out in the yard. We don't get to see the cool stuff, I think. That's
I'd
why
agree.
all of this seems disruptive, but it's not being treated as it's being treated as a pittance. It's the people who this is all we have. We're very super excited about it, but the people who seem to seem to be able to make the most difference with what's going on seem to be genuinely disinterested.
Yeah, essentially the people who are still sitting on all Tesla's patents, uh,
Yeah.
and research that they stole after he passed. Yeah.
I'm sure that what we're doing is a very low dimensional slice of the fun.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I guess it's just, rediscovering those things and trying to find a way to wrest control of them from, and to put it in as many hands as possible. That's really the thing. I'd like to see this kind of stuff in as many hands as possible, just to see what people do. People are so creative. I just
Well,
want to see what people are.
they're making enough units for a lot of people to get their hands on it, and if the mass appeal isn't there right now, you're going to see the market flooded with units that nobody wants to buy because, let's just say, the price point. And then those units will be, sold off, at a lower cost just to get rid of them. And then I think you'll see more adoption through the used market. A lot of people don't want to be the guinea pig. And right now, I think the average person would feel like the guinea pig, and they wouldn't be 100% wrong to make that assumption. As far as a consumer product is concerned, a lot of people who are used to the throwaway culture are not going to have the patience to deal with what they get in the box. This Christmas, I'm sure there's a lot of returns. And a few associates of mine were contemplating going to the various box stores that are selling these 3D printers around Christmas and giving them a card and saying, hey, when you get a return, which you will, send them our way and we'll try to train them before you have to take a hit on the return on the bottom line. Because you're going to see there's a lot of buyer remorse going on right now. We're still not at a microwave yet, and people demand microwave level interaction.
Yeah, people have been trained to expect that. It should just be plug and play.
Yeah. And people got really excited to hear HP was entering the 3D printing market when, they're going to be applying their inkjet heads to biomed applications. They're not going to be coming out with a Best Buy level 3D printer for you to bring home and use like you're using your printer copier scanner. That's just not going to happen yet.
How far out do you think we are from that?
I don't think you're going to see it come from the big boys. I think you're going to see a big boy emerge. And It's going to be not sure who or how or what technology. Right now, we're not only in the VHS beta race, we're in the VHS beta, Blu-ray, peanut butter or gel. Like everything's out there. And there's no, top dog quite yet. The people who hold open sourceness and recyclability at heart, they're going to probably branch off, do their own thing. You've got resins, that's a whole different camp. And then you've got people who don't care and will buy the ink from the big brands. That's a whole nother section. it's very partitioned right now. So no idea which way it's going to go.
So you're thinking maybe at some point, though, there could be another like Apple or Microsoft of 3D printing, is essentially what you're saying, though. Some upstart company will become some kind of huge, you know.
It may be a foreign entity. It's probably, the Europeans are doing a lot of 3D printing stuff that is not really hitting the market because they're not distributing over here. So it's not really, being tried out. And they've got a very smaller market of users over there. So once you get a global Ultimaker for desktop guys, if anybody's really interested in getting something for themselves, definitely look up Ultimaker. They're from the Netherlands, and they're doing pretty well. And if they get acquired by, I don't know, let's say BMW acquires Ultimaker, there's your behemoth. It'll be an outside entity with giant market share that brings the money and lets the Apple type company be the Apple type company.
Okay. Well, I think we're getting close to time here. I wanted to ask you to, if there's people out here who are interested, they haven't dipped their toes into 3D printing yet, can you give some people some advice on the best way to get started? Maybe give them some resources or, some places to get good information.
Yeah, the 3D printing subreddit is turning out to be a great community. Lots of helpful people there. A lot of newbies come in, ask questions, and people are, quick to give them good answers. And it's always good to search your local area through the various service sites as 3D Hubs and Make XYZ, and see if there's anybody 3D printing around you, and maybe you can get an example print, and they'd most likely be happy to show you their machine and get you going on local resources. It's always best to go with an open source machine, just keeping your options open in the future. And if you're at all mechanically inclined, try to build your own, because knowing it in and out is the way to learn these things. Then, as far as making something, being intimidated about making something or building one of these kits, YouTube, the college education that is YouTube is really amazing. There's the real point of everything tonight is just to say, make something. And even if if you get a 3D printer and you make a 3D printer and you've got a tool to make a bunch of other awesome things, and just relying on all the awesome people on YouTube who, for their free time, just, make tutorials and walk you through things. And there's really nothing out there that you can't learn off of, spending 40 minutes watching YouTube videos.
Yeah, YouTube's an incredibly valuable resource. Yeah, I'd encourage everybody out there to explore this, and, open source. I think that's important. Yeah. And, start doing interesting things, useful, interesting things. Play around with it. I mean, this is incredible technology, and we're right at the, basement level. We get together with it early. I think we could do some real special things with it.
Absolutely. Be the manufacturing source for your local reality. I think that's a great goal to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Adam, do you want to give out any contact information? Where people can find you, anything like that?
I'm in a bit of a state of flux, so I'll just send my Twitter out there. Adam J, ATOMJA, 2 A's and a Y, yeah, on the Twitter. And
all right, yeah, that's at Adam J, ATOMJAAY.
Yes.
So, all right, great. Hey, it's been fun, Adam.
honestly, I think we're gonna try to have you back, like, I don't know, periodically every few months or resting comes up. As
No,
we
I'd be happy to be the technology correspondent.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's wild how fast this thing's progressing. You could actually do it every few months.
Yeah, crazy. All right, so Adam Jaay, Patrick Ryan, Eric Card, Free Radical Media Podcast. Thanks a lot, everybody, for listening, and